I couldn't compete in the GMTK Game Jam last year, but this year I was determined to get a shot. I was able to compete in the Game Jam 2 years ago, and that was fun, but I learned a few things from that Game Jam. Specifically, I learned I should play test more, and I learned I should definitely make it pretty. I had tried to make it pretty. If you watch my other video, I talk about how I need to make it pretty, but yet I still failed. And it was because I kind of saved it all to the last minute, and I had some struggles and things where I just didn't really understand some of the lighting stuff from the Unreal Engine back then. The exciting thing now is I've been doing Unreal Engine daily professionally for the past 2 years. So nothing really teaches you how to use the Unreal Engine like using it every single day, 8 hours a day. That really teaches you a lot. So this year, I'm really excited about what I could possibly do. I finally get kind of an unfettered chance to just jump in and see what I can build. So there I was, kind of filling in holes and wrenching on as a fence that had, wrenching stuff. I had to wrench on the fence a little bit, just sitting there thinking about what could I do. And it hit me. I enjoy being the dealer in a card game. I like shuffling cards and throwing cards and giving out cards to people. And there's a little bit of trick that goes with that because you have to do it the right way or everybody gets mad at you. And I thought, well, that would be a fun role reversal because there's already kind of inbred. No, that's not the right word. Already an ingrained game to being a dealer. It's a reversed role than what you would normally do in a card game, which is play. So I decided that was going to be my idea, but I was super worried because unlike other game jam ideas where I really felt like I had some kind of novel new way to play, this particular time I don't feel like I had a novel new way to play. I was kind of looking at a game that I felt would be similar to other games. But it was really the best idea I could come up with, so I decided I was just going to have to lean on my intuition and give it a shot and kind of use play testing and the follow the fun mentality to see where it was going to get me. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to make shuffling a mechanic, serving different people, handing out the bets back. I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like yet, but I did know something I was really wanting to stick to was to make you have to toss the cards to people. And if you toss them too hard, it could go off the table, and that would make them upset. And I thought, great. I think that's a great place to start. And in the Unreal Engine, there's this really cool way that friction works, where you can kind of make these friction materials. And I had made an air hockey table before in a work game jam, and that actually didn't make the final game because of a GitHub issue. But anyway, that was the first goal, and I needed to make something kind of like a card. But there's a problem when you make something really flat in a game engine. If you don't know, a lot of times flat things don't do well with fast collisions. So when you're throwing something really thin, it sometimes goes through the wall. So you have to make it not thin. So I made it really thin, but I also made it have an invisible box that was much fatter. And what was cool, because of some camera tricks and perspective, you can't really tell that the box is much bigger. And in some of this early footage, you're going to see that the box is a little bit visible, but I'm able to kind of tease it out and make the box disappear over time. The game's already starting to look very programmery, not very artsy. And if I've learned anything, nobody cares about your stuff unless it's pretty. It's just a sad truth. I used to think like it's the technical part that matters. It's the part that makes everybody think, and the intriguing parts, but no one really gets into it if it looks like garbage, or maybe not no one, but it's much harder sell. So I decided to try to put a big spotlight up and just kind of see where that got me. And man, instantly I kind of felt like there's this intimate card table. Kind of felt like a casino, which is something I could really roll with. And I knew I was doing blackjack as a game, so I went ahead and just went with that. So for the card throw, I wanted you to be able to just kind of flick the mouse, and so I just kind of put 2 vector grabs on for screen space, and like when you clicked in, it got one, and when you let go, it grabbed the other, and then I just fed that right into the impulse, and it worked. It came out on a nice perpendicular line to it, so I kept it. And the longer the line, the harder the throw. And I was like, this is great. You get a lot of control over it, but it's not exactly intuitive about where it's going to go. So there's some natural difficulty to the game. That just worked out. Super lucky that worked out so well, especially with the slide mechanic. But the real problem with that is I couldn't tell what I was doing, and I was having a lot of trouble doing the same shot consistently. So I actually hadn't done this before. I figured out that you could just draw, because I had a HUD widget just kind of over top of everything. You can actually draw on widgets in the Unreal Engine. So I just created a way to just kind of draw a line every time I clicked and dragged. It's a little clunky. Sometimes it makes it not pretty when you're trying to click on the UI, but I mean, totally works for what I was trying to do. So it's gonna float. And I wanted to make some sort of matte material. I ended up dithering one of my shapes from my asset pack that I created. So it's not work I did pre the jam. It's an actual asset pack that you can buy in the Unreal Engine store called Starter UI. It's awesome. It saved my life because I used it the entire time. I made it to where you have a lot of pictures that are ready to go for the Unreal Engine, especially these are also ready for mobile and things with the way they're sized, and it was like a lifesaver. Like I used it for everything. And it even used it for like just use the icons for materials. And this made a nice little kind of matte material. I futzed around with a lot of different things, found some cool stuff that I was not trying to make. And eventually I found something that I felt was like a nice card table matte look. Really the dithering just leaned into the shadows and the dithering a little bit, and that worked out great. And I've got cards that slide. They just say Joker right now because, you know, joke's on me for thinking this game looks good. But it was coming together. I didn't care if it slightly slid off. I cared if it kind of stayed on the pad for a significant amount of time. So at first it was 2 seconds, but for 1.5 seconds, if it's on the pad for 1.5 seconds, it's going slow enough that I will consider it having reached its location. But I need some way to figure out if they're asking for something. One thing that's fun about Blackjack is they always say hit me whenever they want something. And so I wanted them to say hit me, and I thought about doing some voice acting where I was just gonna have some gruff men going hit me, I want you to hit me all the time, and I didn't actually get to that point, but it would have been cool. It would have been really cool, trust me. So they just have little signs that say hit me, and those pop up when they need a card. And now I've got my base game loop, and that pops up, it goes away, pops up, it goes away. You have to throw them and they pop up at random times. I need to go ahead and put a little timer in there that checks to see if you've been waiting too long. So I make it change colors where it's green, and I keep kind of futzing with the light. This is my first time messing with Lumen a lot. Lumen's really cool. Lumen is allowing me to do a lot of really fun lighting stuff just for free. It just keeps happening accidentally. Like I add an effect from the marketplace, and suddenly these coins are reflecting everywhere, and it just looks really cool, and I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. That's the good part about Lumen. The bad part is it's certainly less performant than I'm used to working with. If you don't know, on this channel, a lot of times I do VR stuff, especially for Quest. So I'm used to like making things that run on toasters, and so I was a little excited. I was like, this isn't the most optimal way to do it. And I was like, stop, you're on a game jam. Let the CPU handle it just this once. And so there we go. I just decided to let Lumen do its thing. It did come to bite me later, but we'll talk about that. The lights were a little hard to see, but eventually I got to where you could see the green, you could see the red. I didn't have a scoring system in yet, but it was already getting stressful because as soon as they popped up, I was like, can I get there before it turns red? Can I get there before it turns red? And no, it was really hard to get there before it turns red. I don't really have a good game design feeling of having timed interactions. I need some way to blow off steam, and I want to kind of encourage the player to just kind of chuck the card somewhere. I thought about having them check them out in the distance, but with the way it worked, I decided to go ahead and have them chuck it backwards at the camera and call that burning a card. So randomly, well, not randomly, every minute there's a new round, and in a new round you can't move on. You actually lose your time in the next round. You can't move on until you burn so many cards. At first I had it to where you burn like a ton of cards, but later when I changed how burning worked, it got a little too slow to burn that many cards. So I decided to go ahead and reduce the number, but you'll see some crazy high numbers where I just wanted you to chuck a whole bunch of cards in between. And it's nice. It's a good stress reliever. I started feeling the draw of the game and seeing the fun of it, and I started having my family play test it. My wife's not super into these kinds of games, but she was telling me that it was definitely looking a lot better than my other games, so that's great. And then my son liked it, but he had a little difficulty with it, so I made it a little easier to throw, and he started liking it a lot more. I learned a lot from that interaction. My daughter loved the game juice of it, so the juicier I made it, the more sound effects I added, the more things I made pop, the more lighting stuff I did. She'd come down, she'd sit and play it longer and longer and longer. So I think the juice is going the right direction. And I had friends, Derek and Caleb, help me out a lot. I sent them the game and sent them gifts of the game over and over again. And they gave me really great feedback, invaluable feedback, ideas, and they also played it. And one thing I learned from playtesting, this was going to bite me bad, burning cards didn't work right. And he was like, guess what? I can't get past the card burning. And I was like, oh, we got a teaching issue. Because the card burning was working fine. It wasn't a bug. It was the fact that he just didn't know how to do it. And even though I had a wonderful little arrow out there saying like, hey, burn cards by throwing it backwards, it didn't actually say that well enough. So I decided to make some more affordances for that to make sure that you knew you were doing it right when it burned a card. I didn't want it to count the cards for you, though. I wanted you to count the cards because I wanted you to stop thinking about whatever you were thinking. I wanted you to count and watch these cards like kind of explode in the coins all over the camera. Because I just want it to be a blow off steam moment, and the counting was some minor challenge just to kind of keep your brain engaged in between. And I think that was working well. And he had wonderful things to say once I fixed it, and we were cooking. So I had a lot of cleanup to do. The game was coming together way better than I thought. I'm still worried because I don't have something novel, something just, oh my gosh, no game's ever done this before. But I do really feel like I've done a good job handling the rule set. I decided to make it to where, I struggled with different iterations of it, but I decided to make it to where you lose money if it ends a round and people are red and waiting for their card. You get extra money if you get it to them while they're green. You get a little bit of money if you do get it to them while it's red. And that kind of makes some interesting gameplay because it's dangerous to leave red out in the field, but it's more lucrative to spend your time trying to throw a card to the green. I feel like the natural fun of watching something slide was a good pillar to lean on, and I leaned on that pillar hard, and it held me up. It held up the whole game. Good pillar. I needed a kind of way to make it all make sense, so I decided to make it a tip, and I decided to make you have to pay your rent with the tip. So in the instructions, it says you're not going to be able to pay your rent unless you make $118 and you show up to play blackjack. But roles reversed, they actually gave you a job being the dealers, and you can make that money with tips. So you need to make $118 of tips in 5 rounds. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to pay your rent. There you go. Now I got a story. Now I got something to ground and motivate the player. And I just realized it's an hour to go, and I haven't finished the tutorial yet. I had only done part of it. I had taken some screenshots, but I didn't actually make the tutorial. I just finished the 5 rounds code to make it actually end in 5 rounds. And I thought I was going to do an awesome tutorial. I thought maybe I'll just make this big flip chart or even a video in the game where I show how to play and do all this graphic design, make it show how cool the game is and the cool things you can do to get them hyped up before they even started. And then I was like, ooh, I just got to make this thing a widget. So I put it all on like a PNG picture, and I put it all together and just flashed the picture up when the game started, and flashed it up. If you pause it to look at the tutorial, it pauses the game and puts up the tutorial. If you unpause it, tutorial goes away. Clean, works, done. All right, I get this thing submitted, and it is like 15 minutes till, and I'm playing it, and I realize, oh no, it's being all laggy all of a sudden. And I was like, no way, what's going on? This game played awesome. And then I realized I changed the texture of the table, and all those reflections and lumen were just working against me. They were just doing too much reflection math, and I was like, I can either turn lumen off or I can change the texture of the table. Thankfully the table texture wasn't anything fancy, so I made it, it was a PBR material, and I just kind of re-lessened the amount of instructions it needed to decide how to look, and so the draw call got a lot simpler, and that fixed it. It started running smoothly again. Whew. just in time. I was turning that in at 12:02. Thankfully, it went down, and GMTK said, okay, you know what, you got till 1 o'clock. For me, it was 1 o'clock. They gave us an extra hour, and I got the thing turned in at 12:02, which I was pretty much, I could have, it's kind of on time, but like, I don't know if I could have done it if they didn't add that extra hour. So now I have a game. It's up. It works. I think you're gonna like the game. It's really addictive. I ended up playing it way too much, like constantly just sat there and played it while I was quote unquote play testing, but I ended up just playing, not even play testing. And that's a great sign. It's really addictive of a game. I feel almost guilty about how addictive the game is. It's on itch right now. Check it out. Rate it if the Game Jam is still going on. That would help me a lot. Let me know if you entered the Game Jam. I will try to play some of your all's games and rate them myself if I can. Depends on how many comments are under this video. So like it if you enjoy the video. Good luck with the Game Jam if you're the one part of it. And I'm excited to see what everybody did this year.